Welcome to another episode of Piercing Q&A. My name is Scott Wilkinson, actually, and I've been piercing since 1994. And right behind the camera over here is Jared. Jared's going to be asking all the questions that you guys are sending in. That's what we're doing here. We're just, you guys send me some questions. I'm going to answer them as best we can to get all the way through here. We're going to probably go for about an hour and a half. And when you ask your questions, be very specific. Let us know how long you had the piercing, what you would think the issue might be, if it's quality jewelry, anything you can tell us helps us answer the question. So, and another quick announcement, we're not going to be actually broadcasting next week. I'm going to be out of town spending the holidays with my families up in Minnesota. So, you got to bundle up for that one.
Enjoy the snow, right?
Yeah, for real.
Okay, so we do have a first question here, and it's pretty specific. Are there certain people who are unable to get their tongue pierced because there's a vein in the way? Because one of our viewers had their piercer tell them that they weren't a candidate for a tongue piercing because of a vein. Is that a thing?
Now, in my experience, I know exactly what they're talking about. Sometimes you put that clamp on there and you get this big dark vein right down the middle. You have your two ones on the side, which hopefully you're not hitting. Hopefully you're not that far off, but there's that one in the center. A lot of times those veins you can roll, and a lot of times the piercer can move it out of the way. Now, the other thing I like to tell people is sometimes if I can't get that vein out of the way and it's dead center, I tell them that I'm just going to offset the centerness of the piercing a little tiny bit on the bottom so it goes off to the side. It's pretty easy to avoid, and honestly, if you hit it, you're just going to bleed a little bit. It's not the end of the world. Think about it. People actually fork their tongues where they actually take the scalpel and split their tongue. So if they can get away with that and not bleed out, if you nicked it, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but a slightly crooked piercing on the bottom is generally the answer.
All right. So hello from New York.
Hi, New York.
Chloe. That's Chloe says hi. Also, Joel Hernandez says, I did it. I got my Manus piercings and they didn't hurt at all. Love the channel.
Congratulations. I'm jealous. I wish I had mine done.
Now, Chloe has a question.
Sure.
And what are those symmetrical marks under your eye sockets?
Okay. Good question. Actually, if you go through my videos, there's going to be a suspension video and branding video, and that's what these actually are. These are brandings. We took it's a machine called a Geiger machine, which is a thermal cauterizer, and we put all these little dots underneath my eyes. Now, I had them heal up, and I heal scars really, really well, so it didn't show up very much, so I had it done a second time after this. And that second time we did it, we also tattooed a little white outline around the edge of the ring to kind of make them pop a little tiny bit more. So they're actually brandings, I think 6 dots under each eye, and then a white outline around the edge of the branding. Thanks for noticing.
It's a super cool video. I think it's called like branding suspensions and something, oh my.
Yeah.
And it's actually, we ripped it from an old VHS. You can watch a video of him actually getting it done. So there's actual video of that branding occurring. So you should go check that video out.
It's probably in the mid-90s. Mid-90s, so yeah.
All right. So.
Thanks for noticing.
Question, got a pimple on a fairly new piercing. I thought it was a bump, but it isn't. And I don't want to infect the piercing, but I want to pop it so bad.
Fight the temptation. In my opinion, the best thing to do would probably be do like a hot water soak. Sometimes if you actually soak it some really hot, don't burn yourself, but soak it, that might open it up and be able to kind of almost pop it itself without causing the trauma to the piercing. Otherwise, yeah, just be patient. It'll go away on its own. Popping it's only going to make that scarring and a longer healing process. It's for that 1 second of gratification is weeks, sometimes months of extra healing.
Not worth it. Even just with regular pimples, you probably shouldn't pop them. You'll end up with scarring.
Correct.
Better to let it alone.
Correct.
All right. So Bob G asks, what is emu oil and will it fix a hard bump near my cheek piercing?
I can't promise that it'll fix it, but a lot of times it does alleviate excessive scarring and that little bump. Depends on why the bump's there. If it got ripped or torn and it's excessive scarring, it might not completely get rid of it. But if it's an irritation bump because it's kind of fresh and kind of has that red, then it probably would help quite a bit. Emu oil is like the fatty tissues from the actual emu itself, comes from Emu Ranch, and basically you just put a little tiny dab on your washed clean hands and then apply it right to the wound, and I found it really helps my piercings that are irritated. So that's the one oil I only ever suggest. I don't like any of the other ones at all, just the emu oil. So
Gray has a question about how to safely remove externally threaded jewelry. So say you have some bad jewelry and can I get it out without that file effect? Is it that big a deal to pull it through just once?
Just once isn't the biggest deal in the world. Make sure your piercing's lubricated. Like soak your ear in some water or whatever. Make sure it moves freely first, and then you do it. When you pull it dry is when it's going to do the most damage. But Jared's exactly right. It's like over time, if you keep doing it, it's just going to keep ripping and tearing, ripping and tearing, ripping. And eventually, it's going to build up a lot of scar tissue. One time's not the end of the world. That's why we just prefer changing things over. If the damage was done, we wouldn't offer to change it over already. So,
all right. Next question. Hi, Scott. My newish
Hello.
Piercing, 3 or 4 months old, gets infected every time I start smoking cigarettes again. Is this common?
That's a different one. I mean, I suppose that like you're changing your body. You said it's a newish piercing.
Yeah, 3 or 4 months old, and they find that when they start smoking, it acts up. It seems, and it seems to be correlated. When they quit smoking, it calms back down.
Well, I would say it's more stress than the smoking. If you quit smoking and you start it up, that means things are probably pre-stressed for you. Hence, your piercing is going to be acting up, and that's why you want to alleviate stress. So you start smoking, and the bump just shows up a couple days later. I don't know if I would say that it's from the smoking. I would say it's probably from the stress, which is making you start back up.
Interesting.
That'd be my guess. I can't imagine it would be causing the problem for that other than, yeah. Interesting question. Good one.
Nita has been told by a piercer that they won't be allowed to have a new Doth piercing until their healing helix piercings have fully healed. Is this true? I've had these helix piercings for 2 months.
Yes. Your piercing is still in the healing process. Sometimes helix piercings can take 6 months, even up to a full year to heal. I personally don't like having more than like 5 piercings healing on a person, maybe 6 if they're just earlobes and they're a fast, easy heal. But anything beyond that weakens your immune system and you're more prone to infections. They're open wounds much longer and you're just more prone to problems. And our goal as piercers is to get these piercings to heal up for you. So we're looking out in your best interest. We want the shortest, easiest healing process for you. And that's because you need to have a full, strong immune system.
Now, what if another piercer has a limit of less than 5? Is that okay? Like, what if somebody else will only put 3 on you at a given time? Is that make that person wrong, or is that?
No, I'm not going to say it's wrong. It's their personal prerogative, what they want to do and what they're comfortable with, their rules in their shop. I mean, like here in our shop, we try to ask people not to touch piercings because it's going to spread germs around. And I had someone the other day saying, well, that's a really weird rule. I'm like, well, if you're touching piercings, it's no different than sticking like your finger in your nose and maybe picking your nose and touching things. That's gross. But one thing's that, we all have our rules to try to for health and safety. I'm not going to freak out and like yell at them. Some shops will do that. So everyone has their own version of what's the safest and best. I know people touch your piercings. I know things like that are going to happen. It's not the end of the world. Now, back to if you really think that 4 piercings is it depends on climate, depends on location, humidity, the dryness of the area. There's a lot of factors. So it's up to the piercer.
So Noah wants to know if it's possible to not be able to get a septum piercing.
No, you can totally get a septum pierced. It just might not be in the septum and it might be through the cartilage. I've seen it before where people have such a tight little tiny gap or reconstructive surgery where that septum gap wasn't actually even there. And we actually went through the cartilage. I let them know beforehand, it's probably going to hurt more. It's going to be a longer healing process. But if someone wants it that bad, we can make it look like it's through the septum, but it's actually through the cartilage. It's pretty rare. And, either the piercing's a difficult one to do or an easy one to do. A lot of piercers fear septums because they're tough to get straight. And if they don't want to do it, they're just going to say, no, you can't get it done. I wish they'd be more honest and say, no, I don't feel comfortable doing it and said, you can't get it done. But that's what it comes down to.
Right. A lot of people don't want to admit,
yeah,
when you don't want to do something. So is it normal that a helix piercing doesn't make any crusties? I got it a bit over 2 months ago.
Sometimes that does happen. Another thing to keep in mind is when we're in the shower, sometimes those showers are just getting enough of it off. It does happen. It's not the end of the world. The only issue I would say is if your piercing's really sore, it's starting to get swollen, and you don't have any crusties on there, then you need to get it taken care of because that would be concern of like an abscess where things are getting trapped inside the body. So if it doesn't hurt and everything seems to be healing fine, you're okay.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
I'm all right too. They want to know how we were doing.
Yeah.
All right. So if you get a lip piercing, will you get a canker sore? Because in this case, a person bit the crap out of their inner lip and got a canker sore where they had bitten themselves. So they're curious if it's possible that a piercing could cause one.
I don't think so. I've never really seen one. I've seen piercing bumps, but piercing bumps are different than canker sores. A piercing bump's more of just like a buildup of scar tissue or an irritation. But yeah, no, I can't imagine that'd be directly related.
All right. Can you drink alcohol after getting your tongue pierced 3 weeks ago?
Sure. The issue is alcohol eats scar tissue and minimizes your ability to heal that a little faster. My big concern is alcohol, when you get drunk, numbs the mouth. And I see people like, look, and they're playing with their tongue piercing. It doesn't even hurt. And the next morning they wake up with a ripped and bruised tongue piercing because they don't know the damage they're doing. If it seems healed 3 weeks, you probably are healed enough. Just be careful and be aware of it.
Javier wants to know, what about a Prince Albert wand? Recovery time?
Okay, so for those of you who don't know what a Prince Albert wand is, we got to go to my drawing table here. A Prince Albert wand is basically like a tube, not drawn to scale here, okay? And it's hollow on one side and then hollow on the other. And a lot of times there's a bar sticking out right here so this bar here screws into that post. This long post hollow tube goes down the urethra for a Prince Albert, which goes in the urethra and out the bottom of the head. And this bar right here that I'm circling actually goes through the Prince Albert piercing. Now, a lot of times this is a hollow tube, and sometimes they will actually even have a bead which screws on the front so you can unscrew it and actually urinate. I would never pierce with a Prince's wand like this. This is something for a healed piercing only. So heal it with a normal jewelry, then you can put this in. But for those of you who are curious, this is called a Prince's wand. It's yeah, sometimes you can find it in certain sites. It's specialty aftermarket jewelry.
Now, is this for urethral play, or is the idea to like allow you to pee more easily? Like, what's the purpose?
Okay, there's a couple different purposes. Sometimes it is urethral play if people want to stretch and kind of get into that type of thing. Sometimes if someone has a problem with an erection, this actually keeps the penis hard. You can put it in there and then the bar holds it. So it's the metal version of Viagra, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The
Options.
things you learn on a Piercing with Scott live stream. Okay, and recovery time on something like that for Javier's second part of the question.
Prince Albert piercing, generally you're going to seem healed within a couple weeks, but we say 6 to 8 weeks to be fully healed up. Once you're fully healed up in that 6 to 8 weeks, then you can probably start using that Prince's wand. I don't know if you're into urethral play, but sometimes you need to be stretched up to the size of that wand. So you got to get measured and fit to, you got to know the size you actually need.
Chloe asks, I met a guy who has decorative scarring done on his back. What do you think of those?
I love that stuff. There's different ways to do it, and someday I'm going to have some body modification artists actually elaborating on this, but there's different types of scarring. There's the branding where you can actually burn the scars like I have underneath here. There's also cuttings. Sometimes for cuttings, they can actually just make the nice incision, and it can leave a nice scar. I don't scar, so it doesn't work for me. Some people will actually even do tissue removal, where they actually make like a V-type shape and remove that tissue to leave even a bigger scar yet. These take a long time to heal, and over time they can look super, super cool, but they're kind of inconsistent. I think it's pretty tough to heal these scars consistently, but if you can find someone who's good at this, they look amazing.
What are your thoughts on snakebite piercings? Are they dangerous to get?
Now, snakebite piercings, we're talking about a piercing on each lip here. If you don't downsize your jewelry, if you're playing with it all the time, you're going to chip your teeth and do some damage. Yes, but if it's in the proper placed area, the appropriate jewelry's in there, it's generally not that big of a deal. So it's a great piercing.
All right. Thank you to anyone that says my mustache is cool. I appreciate it, guys.
It is, isn't it?
Catherine recently got her Doth pierced 3 weeks ago. Heals very fast.
Sweet.
And has a quick question about it, though. The pain level is only a 4, but the question is it okay to only rinse it in the shower, or does she have to go get some salt water? Or if the shower's keeping it clean, is it a problem?
Now, I don't condone doing nothing at all. But realistically, the wound is very small and our body can heal it up. Now, when I say do the wound wash spray, it's preventive maintenance. You're trying to prevent infections and things like that from happening by trying to clean the area. Now, one of the big purposes of the wound wash also is to keep the crusties off so it doesn't scratch and irritate. If you're keeping the crusties off in the shower and it seems to be healing, you're probably okay. Again, I don't condone doing nothing to it. It's preventive maintenance and trying to prevent problems from happening. So yes, you can do that and it can still heal.
Ethereal Goddess decided to just take out their septum.
Okay.
And wants to thank you for your help over the last few Q&As. Do you have any advice on abandoning a piercing and any special aftercare to heal up one that you're retiring?
No, not necessarily. Like for a septum piercing, you're probably not going to see any scarring. But for other piercings that are more visible, there is scar tissue remover. You can always use like Mederma, Scargo. I'm not even sure of some of the other brands, but you can get those to get rid of it. And massaging will help break down that fistula. A lot of times, like you feel that little ball or whatever thing of scar tissue on the inside of your ear or wherever your piercing is. If you massage it, you can break it down a little bit more. It may not completely go away, but you can minimize it. And then also keep in mind, don't start playing and massaging your piercing until the wound is closed. If you touch with dirty hands all day long, you're going to trap an infection in there too.
Going to make it worse.
Yeah.
So Ruth got a septum pierced, and the piercer went right through the cartilage, claiming afterwards that the sweet spot was too far back to pierce. Super painful, but it healed up okay.
Okay.
Was the piercer telling the truth? Was the sweet spot too far back, and that's why we had to pierce your cartilage? Is
too
that
far
real?
back. It's kind of a weird way to say it. I would say the piercing, the sweet spot is too small, but not too far back. Even when it's too small, you can almost separate it and kind of manipulate the tissue to kind of get it in the right spot. Too far back. I'm not sure what they meant by that.
So not
Piercers
necessarily.
say things. It's like excuses.
Right.
Yeah. Admit you got it wrong.
So Edna has an interesting question. Will Dahlia bites make my mouth look like I'm frowning? The corners of my mouth are kind of droopy, so I don't know if it'll bring unwanted attention and make it seem like frowny.
You know, there's certain piercings like this that can really affect how you look. You're right. If you take some makeup or markers or something and put dots slightly above the lip line, slightly below, and right parallel, and take pictures and compare them back and forth, it does make a huge difference.
Like it makes you look happier or sadder?
Correct. Same thing with horizontal eyebrow piercings. Like I put lines on people and just the smallest angle makes someone happy, angry, curious. You can change almost emotions by the placement of this. Dahlias are the same way. You're right. If it does come down a little bit, maybe go slightly up to to give that smile but if you're completely parallel, it might make it look worse. So play around with dots before you even go in and have an idea where you want it. It's up to you with placement. You don't have to go exactly where the piercer says it has to be.
Catherine wants to know what your thoughts are on using tea tree oil on an irritated Doth piercing.
Okay. I'm going to go back to that. The last statement I said is don't listen to your piercer as far as there's certain placements where it has to be to heal up properly, but as far as like centered, if you don't think it's centered, you can kind of go. That's what I was trying to say. So I don't get too correct.
Right.
You can still listen to your piercer, but if it doesn't seem centered, you can still manipulate the dot to make it look to where you want it. You're in charge of what it ultimately looks like. Yes. I just wanted to correct myself. I'm like, that came out the wrong way. I knew what I meant in my head.
Scott said not to listen to you, that you don't know anything.
All right. So tea tree oil.
On an infected Doth. Generally a good idea? What do you think?
I'm not a fan of essential oils, especially the tea tree oil. Generally, it's way too harsh. If you have an infected piercing, you should talk to a doctor or talk to your piercer, figure out why or what's going on. If it's infected, you should get antibiotics. First thing I do if I think my piercing's infected is I'm going to do a hot water soak. Soak your ear and try to draw some of the germs and the stuff out of there. Keep the area clean. Don't get soap inside the piercing, but clean around that area. And then maybe a wound wash spray just to get inside your piercing to help kind of flush and get that stuff out of there. If it's infected, you're going to have a lot of crusties. Sometimes emu oil, if it's really irritated, can help calm down that instead of the tea tree oil. I'm just not a fan of tea tree oil. I've never had it work for me. I've seen it cause more problems than actually help. And a lot of times people just alleviate the source of the problem and it goes away. And then they say, oh, the tea tree healed it for me. No, only you can heal your body.
Emily would like to know if you can demonstrate how to change threadless jewelry. Is it difficult to get a couple pieces and bring it close to the camera?
Yeah, no, I think we can do that. How you change it?
Yeah, I think they mean just how it goes together. You just put it together and take it apart.
Some jewelry here. I'll see if I can grab some larger examples. One of those.
And if you just stand up and come closer to the cam, I'll just change
problem.
the focus.
All right. Try not to. Okay, so if I'm standing here, can you see it like this?
Get my focus. Yes.
Okay. See how there is no bend on here yet. We got the Lobret style, and then you got the gem. Generally, when I'm doing this, I'm going to put this slightly in, and then you add just a little bit of a bend. Oh yeah, thanks for the sound. Yeah. When you push it in, it should have a little bit of resistance. This one's a little bit loose, so I'm going to add a little bit more to it. And when you push it in, it's almost going to click, and you're going to feel it. It's nice and tight. Now, basically, you have the disc in the back and then the gem in the front. A lot of times, you just got to hold out of both and literally pull it apart, and you're going to hear it click, and it should separate.
So show us that bent end. It's no longer straight.
See how it just has a small bend on there?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how that works. You push it in, goes almost that far, and the last part just kind of clicks in. Now, another thing is if you're holding on to this, a lot of times you can use your thumb as a leverage. Higher. Thank you. So you use the thumb as leverage, and you can pull it apart, and you're less likely to re-stab yourself, which is a thing. So if you pull it apart, pull it away. Don't just kind of like this because you'll re-stab. These things can be sharp.
Excellent.
Good question. That was fun. All right, I'm kind of tucked tight back in this corner here. See me trying to get back here. We're in my piercing room. It's not a huge piercing. It's about 10 foot by 12 foot, but we're jam-packed in here.
There's lots of wires and monitors and cameras and all kinds of stuff going on.
Great question.
All right. So Manny wants to know if it's okay to pierce an earlobe at 14 gauge right from the start, or does it take longer to heal if you pierce it at 14?
No, it should be about the same amount of time. I mean, honestly, in my experience, the larger you pierce, generally the faster they heal. I have a video of piercing Jose's lobes right to a 0 gauge. So I pierced it a 4 gauge needle and stretched right to the 0. Now, if you do this initially, it can work. I don't ever suggest double stretching or doing things like this on healed piercings, but from fresh, you can always go big right away and they heal really nice and quick.
So Ray got 3 dermals in the forehead and it didn't heal well. They want to get it re-pierced. How long should we wait? Should we wait a few months? The scars are still slightly indented. Do we want to wait until the scars are completely level?
As best you can, I would highly suggest getting scar tissue remover. Break down that scar tissue. You want that skin as soft as possible. I'm kind of curious what the problem was. Did they reject right out? Were they just sitting at wrong angles?
It says it didn't heal well due to heads, HEDS. I'm not sure if that's a mistype or just something.
Maybe the tops of the heads, maybe if they had the ball on there instead of the flat disc. Different types of heads. So yeah, a lot of people will put like prong ends, and the prong kind of has this triangle, so it allows the jewelry to kind of move back and forth. What you want is a flat bezel, so it sits flat and it can't alter. And when it holds steady, they typically heal much, much better. That's my guess on the wrong type of heads on there. So flat disc.
Flat disc on nose. Sharky's from Texas wants to know if your septum is a little crooked, can you still stretch it?
Yeah, you can totally still stretch it. It might show off. Depends on how far you go.
Could fix it too, couldn't it? Potentially, like
maybe a little.
If you went bigger with the hole and then wore a smaller piece of jewelry, would maybe it find its center?
You can still stretch it. I've seen people stretch piercings where they're a little bit crooked this way. It still kind of shows a little bit crooked, but I mean, if you're going up to a 0 gauge and your nose is completely full, no one's going to be able to tell. But you might be able to tell a little bit more if it was around the 10 or the 8 gauge.
Okay.
Bigger than that, it should start looking more straight.
Interesting.
I'm not. Depends on your septum how it's crooked too.
So Lily has a question. Which one is better for a hip piercing, a surface or a dermal?
I would go dermal. Surface bars in the hip area, there's way too much movement, and I've never had any luck with that. The only luck I've ever had with hip piercings is with Tygon, which is almost like an extinct material now for piercings, which is basically like the IV tubing. So, and when we autoclave, when we steam sterilize it, it's like a wet noodle. But these need to be changed out every couple months, like 2-3 months or something like that. And you take internally threaded beads and you screw them on the top. So it just has the room for the movement. Otherwise, I would say the dermal is going to be your second best option. And then the surface bars, like I said, I've had really no luck with it. But on the other hand, I'm in Las Vegas. I was on Fremont Street and I saw a girl who dances up on the bars and whatnot. She actually had surface bars on her hips. Now, I'm meaning to talk to her. I'm going to go ask her and see how long she's had them. So
interesting. They look pretty well healed.
They seem like they were. Yeah. So I want to ask her about it.
Very cool. Dahlia got some piercings in their right ear 11 months ago, and then some new piercings in their left ear 5 months ago. Is it too soon to get some more back in their right ear?
If everything seems like it's healing good, you said 11 months ago for the first?
Yep.
Yeah, you're probably fine. I mean, if it seems like everything's healed up and you're good to go and you're sleeping on it and you're ready for more, you should be fine. Yep.
So Emily is interested in some snake bites. Are there any cons? She wants them really badly, but wants to hear from a professional. Is there any like concerns that we have to have about snake bites?
Number one, if you don't downsize and you leave the lung bars, you could do tooth or gum damage. Typically, the snake bites are a little further out, so they're more away from your teeth than something like a labret. And the other thing is, like, when you're done with your piercings, you might have small scars from where your piercing originally was. Some people scar more than others, but you will have small dots there too. And if you're touching and playing with any piercing, they can get infected. Infections can be bad if they're not taken care of. So take care of your body.
So Tegan has a pretty common problem. Got a nose piercing and it was pierced with a ring. Mm-hmm. So now there's a massive bump. Don't know what to do about it. Should they go back to their piercer and have it changed to a bar, or is it too late?
Depends on how long you've had your piercing. I mean, if you've had it for a couple months and it's really established as that curve, changing to a straight bar is not going to fix the matter. You might need to take it out and start over. Now, if you are recently pierced at a ring where it's only maybe a week or a couple weeks and that bump is forming, you might be able to go to the bar and deal with that bump for a little bit, and it might get better for you too. But if you've had it for a while, you might need to take it out and start over.
But that's why you do not advocate piercing with that ring. It just causes trouble.
I used to listen to customers saying, like, oh, it's the only way I'll be happy. It's like, it'll have to be oversized, and they still get the bump. It was more than 50% of the time.
So
it's just not worth it.
You're trying to give them what they want, but they don't want a bump. They don't know what they're asking for.
Exactly. They want a healed, good-looking piercing. That's what we're aiming for.
All right.
Stud.
This one's pretty simple. Little DeVito, should I get my tongue pierced?
Oh,
it's on you, Scott.
It's on me. I like tongue piercings. They're fun piercings. Of all body piercings, it's probably the fastest one or quickest one people retire. There's the possibility of chipping and damaging your teeth, and because of that, people get rid of the piercing. So if you want it for a little while, that's probably the best bet. Just downsize and go for it. It's a fun piercing.
So we have a Doth pierced, not quite deep enough, but it's okay. It's not going to reject. How long should we wait until we can change the circular barbell into some kind of a clicker with a cluster?
Sure. Wait till the swelling's gone down. If it's only one side, use a camera and take a picture of both your dots, the pierced and the non-pierced. Once the swelling's gone down and they look about the same size, typically you're pretty well healed up. But that's probably going to be the 4 to 6 month range.
Sarah says hi from France.
Hi, Sarah from France.
Sarah got a flat piercing 3 weeks ago. When should she be looking to return to her piercer to downsize the jewelry?
I generally tell people it's going to be a minimum of a month and a half. Cartilage, or the flat piercing, which is in like the middle of the ear, almost where I have the large plug up there. We give room for swelling initially, and then you want to downsize, but you need to heal that fistula or tube of scar tissue enough to where you don't rip or tear it and cause that swelling to start over again. I would say a month minimum. If you can wait a month and a half, it's better. But if you notice your piercing starting to angle or change, definitely go in and talk to your piercer.
Sumaya wants to know, how do you know if your eyebrow has the anatomy for an eyebrow piercing?
Well, as we look at Jared, as he pinches his eyebrow and pulls it out, he has the actual tissue. For me, I obviously do too, because it's there. Now, if you have a hard bone structure and it seems like there's a hard ridge right there, that bar is going to be resting right up against it, and it's going to push out on it, causing it to reject. So if your skin's just a little naturally loose and you don't see that hard bone sticking through, you're probably okay to get it pierced.
What are your experiences doing nose piercings on people who've had rhinoplasties? And what's a rhinoplasty if the people at home don't know?
Plaster of Paris of a rhinoceros.
That's close.
Close.
That's very, very close.
Nose reconstructive surgery here. A little bit of scar tissue in there. Scar tissue is totally safe to heal. You just need to make sure that you talk to your plastic surgeon and ask them when it's safe for you to get pierced. I don't know how long people take to heal, and every doctor has different ideas. So talk to your plastic surgeon or doctor, and then they will tell you when it's okay. They might look at you kind of crazy, like you spent this much money to fix this and you're just going to ruin it again. But some of them are super cool about it. Say, hey, you have a great feature, you want to draw attention to it. I just got this new nose. Why wouldn't you want to draw attention?
Now, you've said something similar about people who get like a tummy tuck that you don't think that they should mess around with trying to pierce it because it will move quickly through scar tissue and they
Correct.
Would the same thing be possibly true of a nose piercing? Would I have to worry about it like moving through that scar tissue?
Trick me, Jared. I like this. I like this. Okay. The big difference is for a navel piercing, you have a small ridge, and that artificial tissue it's weak and it can grow all the way out because the scar tissue is all the way there. Now, when you're dealing with a nostril, the whole thing all the way around, like for it to kind of fall all the way down like that is pretty rare. Now, if you got pierced at the very bottom edge of your nostril, that could reject. But if it's anchored up there enough, there's enough tissue where it's actually going to stay put.
It's like a hard ridge.
Yes.
It's not going to move.
Yes.
Okay.
The ridge is a little bit different. It's a good question, but yeah, the nostril's totally safe to get re-pierced.
Crewhead would like to stretch their ears. What kind of jewel should I start and size? Like, I think they mean jewelry.
A real diamond.
A real diamond.
I only stretch with diamonds.
All right. So what kind of jewelry and how do you start with ear stretching?
A lot of times if you just have normal earlobe piercings, if you ever wear rings or hoops in your ears, just start stacking them. Start putting a couple extra earrings in there. Maybe only look at your studs that only have the thickest posts on there and wear those in there. Now, once you're maxed out on your normal earrings where it's like the thickest earrings and they seem loose because you have to wear them all the time, then go talk to your piercer and we can start you off with some rings or labrettes or some sort of stud. Now, once you get to the 8 gauge, and the gauges go by even numbers for those of you who are in America. Otherwise, it's the whole metric system. I'm really bad at the conversion metric to the gauge system. But we're going to go one size at a time every month and a half to 2 months. So if your earlobe's an 18 gauge, we'll go to maybe a 16 gauge in a month and a half to a 14 month and a half, 12 to a month and a half, and just keep going that way. Now, if it ever hurts, you need to back off. Now, as far as the materials go, like I said, you're going to be able to probably use titanium or glass up until 8 gauge. And once you get to the 8 gauge, then you start using like titanium single flare plugs, surgical steel single flare plugs. Do not stretch with silicone. It's too sticky and it rips and tears your ears. If you have a quality piercer, they'll tell you some good quality materials they have to stretch with as well.
Gloom wants to know how long it takes to fully heal an industrial.
I wish I had an exact time for you. Perfect circumstances, 4 to 6 months. Expect probably a year, but I've seen them take over 2 years. If the angles are off just a little tiny bit, it's going to be a long, long healing process. But if it was done by a really good piercer, 6 months to a year.
Hi, Scott, from Joanna from Poland.
Hi, Joanna.
Do you watch any other YouTube-related piercing channels?
I try to watch them all. I watch all channels. It's a lot of fun seeing what other people say. And that's part of the reason why I started this channel is I used to watch The Modified World with JC Potts. And once he went off air, I was like, there's a big gap there. So I figured I would kind of step in and do the best I could to kind of fill in the proper information and knowledge. There's a lot of drama shows and show people getting pierced. And, I don't know. That's not about me. I'm about giving the information and educating the public, and that's what my goal was. So I just didn't see as much of that.
You like the instructional stuff is more what you're into.
Yeah.
Excellent. Haley wants to get their septum pierced, and their parents aren't really familiar with piercings. How do you ask in an understanding manner? What are some arguments for getting a septum piercing that she could try to use on the rinse?
The way that worked for me, it was like, hey, Mom, I was thinking about getting this piercing or a big tattoo across my neck. Ultimatums. No, don't do that. Septum's an easy one to argue. I know it seems to a lot of older generations a very offensive piercing, but it really isn't, and it is socially acceptable. Now, the other great thing about a septum is all other piercings might leave a scar that's visible. This is a non-visible scar, so when you decide to retire it, no one will ever know. So that's the easiest argument. And you can get pierced with a circular barbell where you can flip it up inside there and they don't have to see it. During those family events like, oh, Christmas, we can't have, you can actually hide that piercing. So it's the most hideable and it's the one that shows the least amount of scarring and it's a really fast healer. So it's an easy one to argue if you have all the information to present properly.
Absolutely. Those are good arguments there.
Big tattoo across the neck.
Yeah,
I really did that. Sorry, Mom and Dad.
So Igloo is thinking of getting a bridge. Will acne affect the piercing? I don't have anything right on the bridge, just on the forehead.
Okay. If it's not right on the bridge, you should be fine. One of my concerns would be is like if you're using any sort of medication for acne, because those chemicals getting into your piercing could cause problems. If you're careful about cleaning your acne and your piercing, keeping separation, you should be good. Now, if the acne's right in that area, you need to get that area cleaned up and you need to be kind of free of the acne in that area to pierce it.
All right. A question about a Smiley piercing.
Sure.
They have a Smiley piercing, but it gets dirty and it stays dirty and it doesn't go clean like a white consistency that comes from my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the best answer to try to keep it clean?
If you have a healed, established piercing, maybe buy another clicker or another piece of jewelry. Clickers are fairly easy to change, and that white stuff you're seeing on there is plaque. You know, plaque is just going to kind of build up on there. And when it's inside there, it's real tough to clean it off there. But if you were to take it out and put a new piece of jewelry in there that's cleaned already, and then you can take like a toothpick or something wood, and it just scrapes it right off there, and you're not going to scratch your metal. So a toothpick, generally like soak in some water, it scrapes right off there, and you can put it in there. But sometimes if you leave that piercing out long enough while you're cleaning it, they can start closing up. So that's why I suggest have 2 pieces of jewelry, and then we can buy a fancy one or 2 different colors, and you kind of change things up too.
Very nice.
Good question. That also happens on tongue barbells. Sometimes people are going to see all that white buildup on that bead on the tongue barbell, and it's like if you're able to take it off, toothpick takes
just
that
rubbing
out.
it with a toothpick.
Yeah.
Do it without scratching it. Now, Stefan is currently healing 3 piercings. Should they go get an industrial done right now, or do you think maybe wait until things are healed up a little better?
Kind of depends on what 3 piercings you're healing up. If you're healing 3 cartilage on this side and you want the industrial over here, you're stuck sleeping on your back for a long time. That's my always biggest concern. 5 piercings to heal at once isn't that big of a deal. Now, if you're already healing a couple piercings, like maybe a couple lobes and a cartilage over here, and you want the industrial on the same side, you're already not sleeping on that side. You're already cleaning that piercing. Go for it. So
Zach V says, will there be piercing with Scott merch? I want some shirts.
Jared, what do you think?
I think so. I was working on it yesterday. There's new merch soon.
Hi, Zach. How's it going, man? Yeah, Zach's actually a friend of the shop here. And yeah, we're working on the merch, actually. A bunch of different designs. We got some fun stuff. Probably soon. Probably
Quite soon.
Weeks.
Right after the new year, probably.
Sweet.
All right.
We'll stick to it. We're going to try to by the new year.
Hold me to it.
Hopefully by the new year.
Emily MHB wants to know, is threadless best, and what's wrong with internally or externally threaded jewelry?
Threadless is nice because typically those beads stay on a little better than the threaded ones. But we are not allowed or not supposed to be doing threadless on like tongue piercings or maybe like curved barbells under the tongue web, things like that. Because if you swallowed that bead, that sharp pin can actually do damage and puncture and so forth. So threadless in the inside of oral piercings is a bad idea. Now, if you're doing a lip piercing with threadless, that's not a big deal because the bead's going to fall to the outside. Hopefully you're not eating your bead or losing your bead that way. So as long as it's a quality metal, internally threaded and threadless are the same quality. It's just how they attach. Externally threaded is a less superior thing because it's going to be scratching and irritating the tissue. And the beads generally don't stay on as well either. So
now Marcus wants to know, I think basically the question is, can you pierce a septum at different sizes, or is there just basically one size and then we stretch from there?
Now, back in the day, I used to pierce septums at a lot of different sizes, but nowadays, most clickers and septum option jewelry comes in 16 gauge. So that's kind of the standard when I start people off. Now, if you came to me and said you wanted a septum piercing, that's probably the size I'm going to start you off with, unless you said, hey, can I start something bigger? I've gone all the way up to, I think, maybe an 8 gauge or a 6 gauge. I think I pierced another 6 gauge septum at someone at a convention way back in the day.
Now you have to have a big sweet spot. Was that an individual who could tolerate that, or you just do that to anybody?
Okay, number one, they were a piercer. It was a stressful piercing situation too, because like I had it done like 3 times, and every time it was so crooked, I can't get it done. And I'm like, well, so I gloved up, I stuck my pinkies in his nose, and I was like, you've got a large sweet spot. These other piercers weren't even close. I said, I could totally do it. I could even do a large size. I guess I was being a little cocky. He's like, yeah, can we? So I think we did the 6 gauge, and I pierced, and he said it was the smoothest piercing he's ever had. I didn't hit any cartilage. So if you have anatomy, yeah, you can pierce at a larger size.
Very cool.
A little scarier as a piercer because they're tough to get straight. So
right, you want to make sure you get that straight too. It's not something you re-pierce immediately.
That's the other advantage of piercing a smaller size. The larger size might hurt a little tiny bit more like that.
I have a really soft, loose bump next to my nose ring. It seems like it almost comes to a head like a pimple. What should I do? Is this a piercing bump? Is this the bump we keep talking about?
There's a lot of piercing bumps. The piercing bump could be several different types, and sometimes they're real hard. Sometimes they like a cyst grows around it and like a blood blister. The best thing to do, no matter what, is not to pop it or pick at it. Hot water soaks can actually, hot showers, soaking your nose in that cup of hot water, like pulls and draws bad things out and softens that tissue. So keep it clean with a wound wash spray, kind of baby it, and hopefully that goes away.
Clarification from Ray earlier, who had the 3 dermals in the forehead. Just a slow healer, so they ended up coming out, and they were, in fact, flat-plated with the balls on the top. So like you said, the ball allows that extra motion, probably contributed.
It's a slow healer in this area. You raise your eyebrows and there's so much movement. So if it's in a crease, if it's getting bumped or hit, if you're sleeping on it, I mean, there's so many factors with every piercing, but that one definitely could be hit or irritated easy.
Brianna has 2 questions about a new Doth piercing.
Sure.
Number 1, how do I know if I'm getting all the crusties because I can't see in there?
Okay.
And 2, they did a curved barbell. Is that right?
Curved barbells are... I won't pierce with curved barbells, I'll be honest with you. The reason being is when we're looking at an ear, like for a Doth piercing, you want the curve to kind of follow this direction. So when you wear the ring, it's going to follow in this, because we don't wear rings that go inside like this. Now, when you have the curve, if that curve heals like this, and then you're trying to put the ring in with a curve this way, you're asking for bumps.
So you're saying basically a curved barbell can spin and change the angle of the piercing.
The curve is going to spin all different directions. Yeah, while it's inside there, and it's going to constantly irritate. Now, if you pierce with the ring, it heals with that size, and it's the only time I ever say the ring is going to be like the only option for a piercing.
So in like Brianna's case, where we've already got it, what she can try to do is keep it aimed the correct direction, not let it spin around.
If it's possible. A brand new piercing, honestly, I would say try to change it out to a ring.
Is it the right curve that a ring could just be put in instead, potentially?
It should be.
Okay.
It should be the same amount of curve. I mean, we're piercing with a straight needle. It's just you're dealing with some swelling, and you're trying to establish the shape of that hole.
Okay. So if it's still early on, you might be able to.
I would change it to the ring early on if you could.
Now, say it's not early on. Like, it's still okay?
As long as it's not healing to the inside, keep your eye on it and get it so those beads are aimed the right direction. That's the big concern with these curved barbells. Everyone always gets it just for the migraine piercing, but you still need to heal it with the proper jewelry. Like, I know you can't have piercing showing, but then you can't get the piercing. That's just, you find the time in life that works best for that situation. You can't like pierce with a piece of plastic retainer and hope your eyebrow piercing. It's not going to heal, and you're going to have nothing but problems. You need to heal and establish it before you start putting those retainers. You might be able to put a curved barbell in there after that hole's established and fully healed to hide it, but you might need that healing time to.
Ghost Raven Gaming says hello from Kentucky.
Hi, Ghost Raven Gaming from Kentucky.
And they have had a new bridge piercing for about 7 weeks.
Right on.
And it just seems to be constantly agitated. Hasn't been infected, however. Is it normal for it to heal super slow like this?
Yeah. These piercings, again, you raise your eyebrow, you squint your eyes, there's movement, and those crusties can get pulled in so easily. I've had mine for years, and once in a while I will get a little bit irritated. Now, the question I'm going to have for you is the bar way too long or way too short? Because if it's too short and the beads are getting sucked in, even when you squint your eyes real tight, if the beads have indent, it's going to cause irritation. I don't know if you can tell on mine, but you will always see just a little tiny bit of bar. There almost has to be just a tiny bit in order for mine to feel comfortable. So I imagine it'd be the same for you. Now, if the bar is way too long and you're pulling crusties through, that's also a problem. So you might want to downsize if the bar is way too long. But be patient. They're a tough one to heal. Sometimes it takes up to a full year to heal these, but they should be healed feel comfortable within a few months, though.
Now, Brianna was in the other day, and she said that you said she would be a good candidate for a triple forward helix.
Okay.
Wants to know when's a good day or time she should schedule them and what jewelry can be put in there. Like, how do people get appointments here, Scott?
To make an appointment here, you want to go to our website, which is piercing.vegas, and you can actually set up the appointment right there online. This is going to be 3 piercings, so you just mark the 3 piercing slot, and then you just kind of pick the day and time that works best for you. It's pretty simple. I just need to put a deposit down, and we kind of go from there. Now, as far as jewelry goes, typically the picture you're going to see for the triple forward helix is going to be like the large, medium, and small gem on there. But it's up to you. You can do any kind of combination. I do suggest I want you to start with a threadless piece of jewelry, because if you use a threaded bead on there, you can't get your fingers inside your ear to check the tightness and you will lose the bead. So I start with threadless jewelry, and then the posts are going to be a little bit long so you have room for swelling. Swelling lasts months and months and months on these ones. But once the swelling goes down, then you downsize. Expect probably a year-long healing process before these are all the way healed up. But yeah, piercing.vegas is how you make an appointment if you want to get pierced by me.
Excellent. Joshua Williams has a question about stretched piercings. If you have one piercing that was pierced at a higher gauge versus another one that we pierced small and stretched up, is one going to close up better than the other or about the same?
If they're close to the same gauge, they'll close up to the same size. Now, if you pierced one earlobe at a normal, like a 20 gauge or 18 gauge or something like that, and then you stretched up to a 0 and you pierced the other one at a 0 and you closed them up, this one's going to close to a dot. This one's going to have that crescent shape incision the size of the piercing needle.
Okay, so if you pierced at a 6 or an 8, that's an actual visible crescent that it leaves instead of a dot.
If you got a magnifying glass, like if I did a 16 gauge piercing and then I wiped the blood right away, you'll see a small crescent incision. It's just the bigger the needle, the bigger that incision is.
More obvious. So it would change the shape of the scar.
Correct.
Interesting. Austin May recently got their ears pierced, and they've been doing really good.
Congratulations. Super fun.
All right. Chloe wants to know, or Chloe, I don't know. What is the correct jewelry for a surface tragus?
Okay, for a surface tragus, you're talking about the skin on the front, almost on the cheek area. For this one, I'm going to use a 16 gauge surface bar with a flat disc or a flat bar on the inside. Let's go back to the drawing thing. Now, a surface bar is basically going to have like a flat, just move that. Go back to here. Still learn how to use this thing. You have the disc on top and a disc on top, and the bar shoots across like so. Now right here, these bars are typically going to be 16 gauge, and it's a nice round disc. And then across the middle here, where I just drew that line, is actually flat. It's hammered flat so you don't feel the bar in the middle of it. These piercings are typically 3/8 of an inch, maybe up to about 3/4 of an inch long. And that's typically what I'm going to use. And again, I don't use a ball on the front. It has to be a flat disc so it sits flat against the face. Excellent.
Now, Kaylee has an interesting question. She's been told that her Doth is not deep enough to get pierced. Do you recommend she just keeps trying shops until someone will do it? Or do you think maybe it's a bad idea?
If you trust your piercer, listen to your piercer. If you keep shopping around, you will find someone to do it. Should you? No. If it shouldn't be pierced, don't do it. Let me see if I have like on this ear here, you can see how the skin It doesn't create a deep enough pocket in here where you can go real perpendicular to the skin. When you have something more like this, is kind of another, there's more of a ridge here where it's going to go perpendicular, and you want this deep enough where it looks like it's almost coming from inside your ear. You can almost see how you can't see where the holes are on my Doth. It's not a super big picture, but it should come from inside. And a lot of times if the Doth starts too far and it's too shallow, they're just going to reject out, and it's going to be a very painful healing process. So if you trust the piercer, don't do it.
Also, Kaylee has an irritated rook. Are there any other remedies other than the saline that you recommend? And hi from South Africa. That's where Kaylee.
South Africa. Wow, cool. Welcome to the channel. The only other thing I would say is emu oil. Emu oil sometimes can calm really upset piercings. You can buy it on Amazon, online. Hopefully someday when we get our web store, we'll be able to sell some of that on there as well. So, but emu oil is about the only thing. Soak your piercing. Keep those crusties off there. Don't sleep on it. And good positive thoughts. That can always help a little too.
Den Sen has a dermal anchor that is starting to act up and poke out of their skin. Is there anything we can do to prevent ejection, or is this the done deal?
If you see that foot coming out, it's already gone.
So take it out before the scar is worse.
Go to your piercer, have it removed right away. If you leave it reject all the way out, because it will come all the way out, but you're going to have a way bigger, way darker scar. Yeah. Yeah, there's no saving it. Take it out. Maybe a month or two later, you could always get it re-pierced if you wanted to.
So Lemmy Lemon had some spider bites, wore them for about 3 years, or no, hasn't worn them in about 3 years. So should we go and get it redone at a shop, or should we just force a 20 gauge through the holes? What do you think?
If you have access to like a normal earring with a butterfly back, I like these for this to see if your piercings are savable, because they're kind of pointy, but they're not pointy enough to actually do the full-on piercing. We're not supposed to anyways. But anyways, soak your lip in some warm water. And if that thin earring, if that just goes through, we could probably stretch you up to a normal body size jewelry. Now, if you're trying to get it in and it's not going anywhere, don't force it. It's going to need to be re-pierced. But sometimes like that piercing fistula will shrink up just to where it gets small and we can stretch it, but sometimes they do fully close too.
I was stretching my ears and I stretched one of them too quickly from the 10 to the 8 and it got infected. I took out the plug to let it heal and the piercing closed up.
Yes, it will.
When can I re-pierce it?
I would say probably about a month or two after it completely closes. If it feels like there's a lot of scarring in there, get that Mederma or scar tissue remover to help get rid of that first. It'll make everything go way better. It could be several months. It could be as soon as a month. It depends on the scarring and the damage you've actually done.
Daphne has a question about female genital piercings. Is it required to use extra protective, meaning thicker condoms forever after you've gotten an intimate piercing as a woman, or is that just during the healing process?
It's just during the healing process. Generally for the first month, maybe a little bit longer. Sometimes they're considered to be open wounds. A lot of the female genital piercings do heal really fast and seem healed within a couple weeks, but be aware that it's probably a couple months. You should be extra safe with those things. Once you're fully healed up, as long as the piercing feels and looks good, like meaning you didn't catch it and rip it or tear it, any open wound, you're more prone to getting STDs and things like that. But once it's fully healed up, you shouldn't have to worry about it the same way. But you should always practice safe sex.
Cheeto Petito Music really wants to get a septum piercing, but wants to hide it during the healing process. Mm-hmm. What do you recommend?
When I pierce here, I like to start people with circular barbells, and sometimes I'll actually adjust them so they actually flip up inside. You can fit it inside the nose. When they're flipped up, they don't move around as much. They typically heal faster, and I prefer this. So when you go to sleep at night for the following month after getting a fresh piercing, tell people flip it up, and they're going to heal way better for you. So that's what I would suggest. Sometimes you can also get pierced with a retainer or that little staple and flip it up so it's invisible the whole time too.
Yum has a great question from the Netherlands.
Sure, Netherlands. Sweet.
What is the deal with those plastic-looking piercing needles I see on some social media accounts? Is that a sign of a bad shop?
No. These are cannula needles. Jared, can you pull up a picture, see if you can find one?
Yeah, give me just a moment.
Okay. Now, basically what this is in some countries, you're required to use this type of needle. Here we use the single-use hypodermic needle with the hub basically cut off on the end. The companies do that for us. We don't do that in the shop. Now, the whole premise is that they're going to do the piercing and they remove the needle, but the plastic hub stays inside there, so therefore it's safer to transfer the jewelry. But I believe you have to use externally threaded jewelry to put inside the tube, and then you pull that through. I'm not a fan of this because eventually you have to remove the jewelry, and that externally threaded jewelry is still going to be getting pulled back and forth within the piercing. I'm not sure if people use internally threaded jewelry with these cannula piercing needles, but it's a possibility. But I know Europe, Australia, you have to use these things. And some companies nowadays here are actually using them. I've never pierced with one. I've always been skeptical because it seems like the needle's one size and then you're trying to stretch to put that plastic tube on the inside. I don't see how that seems like it's more traumatic to a fresh piercing than not. Again, I would love to get pierced with one sometime and see what it's like.
It is difficult to find good pictures of it, but you can see it's basically like there's a thin plastic catheter that's inside the needle, it looks like, so that you can pull the needle out and leave the catheter in.
So when you're looking at the picture, the one with the orange cap or the orange end here, you can see how there's the plastic cap and you pierce and then you pull the second one down is how the needle looks when it comes out. So you're going to pull the needle out, and if you look to the picture just to the right where you see the three stacked each other, there's that actual plastic tube right there as well. Yeah, right where that one. The bottom one is the plastic tube that's left in there, and then you put the jewelry and it pulls it through. So in theory, it's supposed to be safer. I can see how OSHA, places like this would prefer these things. That's why a lot of people actually put corks on the end of needles. So you might see people like, oh, only pierce with corks, you know. But personally, I feel it's more dangerous for me taking a used sharps needle and trying to put a cork on the end of it.
Because you're intending to stab it into something, and it could be your thumb.
Exactly. So it's a fine line. Like, what's the safest, best route? And it's just be safe.
So it's not really a sign of a bad shop. It's more of a sign of a European shop.
Or some piercers might see those videos and say, hey, we should use these cannula needles. Whatever works best for you, you know. As long as they're sterile and clean, that's what matters. You know, sterile, clean, and safe.
Interesting.
Great question. I definitely am going to be talking about these more in the future. I have some samples here at the shop. I just don't have them ready to actually show you, so...
Morgan wants to know, if I get my tragus pierced, will I never be able to wear my AirPods again?
No, you can totally wear your AirPods, but you need to heal your piercing all the way up. And a lot of times we give you that room for swelling. You're probably going to want to downsize to a shorter post, so when you put them in there, it's not hitting the actual jewelry. The disc that goes on the inside of your ear is fairly flat, so it shouldn't be a problem as long as you're healed up. 3 to 6 months minimum.
Haley wants to know when you got your first piercing.
I was 18 years old when I got my first piercing, and it was my earlobe piercings. I wanted to get my earlobes pierced since I was probably, I don't even know, probably like 6 or 10 or something like that. I've been asking, and I wasn't allowed to get them. And on my 18th birthday, I went to the mall and bam, got them done with the dreaded gun. Yep.
It's just Noah. Sees a lot of YouTube videos, sees a lot of messed up piercings, doesn't want to be one of the statistics. How can we be sure that the piercer won't mess up? Like, is there anything we can do to try to know if we've got a quality individual here or what?
You can really do your homework. I mean, when you're like, if you're new to piercings and you see people around town with a lot of piercings, ask them where they got them done. They're going to tell you. They'll be proud. Everyone loves their piercing shop. And the second thing is go on Yelp and Google. Look at some of the different reviews, see what people say. If everything's low ratings, don't go to that shop. If overall everything's pretty high and they have a lot of ratings, it's probably a pretty quality shop. But you got to do your homework and don't just go to the first place you see. Just because they have a license to do the piercing and a business doesn't mean they're a good professional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sevda wants to know, does Jared want any piercings? And if so, would you pierce him, Scott?
Yes, I'm going to get them.
Yeah. I've got my lip rat done. I don't wear it a lot because I do a lot of combat sports like boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and facial piercings aren't really compatible with combat sports. But
not if you like your teeth.
Not if you like them. And I do. I like my teeth. But we are going to do my septum here on the air one of these times. So
yes.
That'll be fun.
Super fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't wait to pierce Jared. It'll be fun.
Next question comes from Eunice. What should I be looking for from a piercer when I'm getting a septum piercing?
Again, do homework. Make sure they've done septum piercings. Maybe look at their online presence, their Instagram, Facebook, if they have a portfolio. If they've been doing it a long time, reviews on Google and Yelp.
If you know someone with a nice septum, ask them where they got it done.
Yeah, your septum looks perfect. Looks like it's, yeah, exactly. Or if they have a bad septum piercing that's really crooked in the wrong spot, ask them too. Like, where'd you get your septum pierced at? Cool, thank you, and move on. Don't be rude about it.
But just, try to get the good info. Yeah. And someone might want to share who their piercer is, get them, more business.
Correct.
Emily S. has an interesting question. I have a husband who has back dimples, which after researching is more rare in men. And it's the one piercing he's willing to get, but he's scared of rejection. What do you think is the rejection rate of dermals in back dimple piercings?
I've never seen one permanent. That's 100% true. Generally, most dermal anchors last a couple years to maybe 8 or 9 max. Back dimples I've never seen fully heal. I've had to take them all out.
So pretty much 100% chance of eventual rejection.
It's just, I can't tell you a time frame. It could be 6 months and they reject out. It could be 10 years, but they will come out.
Temporary at best.
Yep.
So Victoria says, hello, you two. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Hi, Victoria.
I've had my nose ring for about 4 months and it heals really slowly. It's not infected, but it has this whitish stuff coming out. Is that normal?
Whitish stuff, I'm guessing, is like probably little crusties. Now, if it's actually pus coming out of there where it's like a thick discharge, kind of yellowish to greenish, that's signs of an infection. But if it doesn't hurt, I don't know. Sometimes you just get some dead skin cells in there, and if you bump it, like create the fluids, and then you're going to get a little bit of stuff coming out of there. So just keep cleaning your piercing. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about unless it really hurts or it's radiating heat out of there too.
Clover wants to stretch their ears, but they got them pierced as a baby, and one is lower than the other. Can they still stretch them, or is there something they could do to make them even?
It's not a lot you can do to really reshape your piercings. Depends on how far off they are. Sometimes people will just get a second piercing. If it's really far off, get a new piercing and stretch that one. Sometimes eventually that other existing hole will kind of migrate into the other piercing, but you can get it re-pierced in the future, but that one might not close.
All right. Brianna, who we talked about earlier, is going to be coming in for the triple forward, and you also said to her that she shouldn't have been pierced with the curved barbell. You'd suggest trying to put a Doth into that, or a circular barbell into the new Doth?
Generally, that's the better idea, yeah.
Wants to know, is that something you'd be able to do also when they came in for the appointment for the triple forward?
Maybe. Our circular barbells only come in 16 gauge or larger. So therefore, part of me wants to say that it was like an 18 gauge curve. I don't remember exactly. But if it's too thin, I'm not going to run a taper through there and stretch and rip.
So it has to be the right size.
It has to be the right size.
So we'll have to take a look at that. But if it is the right size, that is something you'd be able to do
that. Unless it's too swollen, I have to put too much big of a ring. So it depends. I don't remember exactly, but if I can, I will.
Excellent. Take a look at that for you. Michaela says, if I want to change up jewelry for my new eyebrow piercing, how long do I have to wait after getting pierced to switch that jewelry?
Until your piercing's all the way healed up. If you need to downsize, you can always downsize to a shorter post after maybe a couple months. But I would say wait until those crusties are done, probably 3 to 6 months minimum.
Moonlit Flavia wants to get a navel piercing, but their belly button folds when they sit. Would a floating navel be an option? And would I be able to change it to standard jewelry once it's healed?
Yeah, if you got a floating navel piercing, you could change it to normal jewelry, but a lot of times your belly button is going to eat the bigger gem on the bottom. So it might not be visible, and that's why people do the floating with the fancier gem on the top, because it has to go in further. So you could wear it. It depends on how big your belly button is. If you have a small belly button and everything's closing in on it, that could be causing irritation. But if it's just the shape of your belly button, it's a deeper belly button, you might be fine wearing that too. Just not as visible.
What are things to look out for when getting a belly or a nipple piercing?
Things to look out for. Proper anatomy, number one, for belly button piercings. I won't pierce reconstructive belly buttons. We can't pierce the actual belly button itself. When I go in for the belly button piercing, I'll also feel the tissue on top, make sure there's no herniated, the umbilicus, the tissue coming forward, because you don't want to pierce those inner organs, basically. It can be kind of dangerous. So those are things I'm looking for. Things you should be looking for is a qualified body piercer who has done piercings that look healed, a clean shop. So many things. Personal, just a clean, safe piercer you feel comfortable with.
So Lee says, hey, from the UK.
Hey, Lee from the UK.
Recently had a left tragus pierced 4 weeks ago, followed by a rook a week later. Tomorrow I'm having a conch done. How painful compared to the tragus and rook do we expect the conch to be?
The conch is a scary one to walk into because we've all felt it and said, ooh, that's the thickest cartilage in our ear. But at the same time, a tragus piercing and a rook, we have obstacles we need to kind of go around, so it's not as I say, fast of a piercing. A conch piercing is just straight through, either into receiving tube or freehand, and they work really easy to do so. I think it's easier than the normal one. The only issue with the conch piercing is going to be masks, if your mask rubs right up against it if you're still wearing the mask.
So Kaylee has a 2-month-old rook and is considering getting a helix on the same ear, or do you think it'd be better to go to a belly piercing so that we're not beating up the same ear?
You're already not sleeping on that ear, and you're already cleaning that side, so
might as well get all those birds with the same stone.
Yeah. Belly piercings, it's kind of a long healing process, but it's not like it's going to stop you from sleeping this way your ear piercing would. So if it takes 6 months or a year to fully heal up a piercing, I wouldn't want to add another 6 months to a year after I fully healed the first one.
Right. You're just expanding the time. You might as well concurrently. Simon stretched his medusa and closed it, and there's a scar there. Now, if we got it re-pierced and stretched, will the scar tissue just move to the sides? Like, would we be able to re-pierce through the existing scar and then stretch it, or is that going to present problems?
Wow, you got me on that one. You can totally re-pierce scar tissue, but how scar tissue actually stretches compared to... So because if it's a larger piece of scar tissue...
It's not going to want to stretch. It might still. It just might be a slow stretch.
If it's a lot of scar tissue, I'm going to suggest you maybe like massage it and break down as much of that scar tissue as possible to actually make it an easier process for you. I don't have the solid answer for you. If I had to guess... I would say you can totally re-pierce it, but I have a feeling it's going to probably push it off to the side. But if it's a large piece of scar tissue and you pierce in the middle, I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting. Nice. Don't often stump the guy here. So Amsus wants to know, how long will their nose be a little swollen from a septum piercing? And hi from Belgium.
Hi. Expect probably like 3 to 5 days. It's going to be swollen on the inside, probably not super noticeable. You might see a little bit of puffiness on the bottom, but it typically goes down fairly quick as long as you're taking care of it and you're keeping the crusties off. If your jewelry's constantly being scratched and irritated from crusties, it's going to stay swollen definitely quite a bit longer.
Helena wants to know if a lip piercing on the side can be done right at the lip line, or does it have to be lower than the lip line?
No, you can do above the lip line, on the lip line, or below it. Keep in mind, the lower you go onto the lip, the more you're going to be putting that disc into the gum area. And once you have irritation against the gums, you can get gum erosion. So the higher up it is, generally the safer it is.
Comment from Simon that cannula piercings are easier in his opinion, don't hurt, and when they do that little stretch with the cannula, he doesn't notice that hurts.
It goes so quick. I can't imagine you and I just didn't know. So
and
I really want to get pierced by one someday.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll do it live on the air here. I have some. Go. Just put a hole in me. Yeah.
Gray
wants to appreciate that. Sorry, Jared.
No problem at all. So Gray wants to know, how long does it take to heal a piercing infection? And does that change the overall healing time if you have a complication in the middle?
If you went to the doctor and you actually had an infection and they gave you antibiotics, does that completely boost your immune system, Jared? I know it helps heal piercings. I know people who have things where their immune system is like weaker, a lot of times doctors will put them on antibiotics before they actually get pierced so they can heal the piercing better.
Interesting. I know overuse of antibiotics is bad. Like there has to be something bad in you for them to kill. It's not like it just generally makes you
But the question
healthier.
is, if you're on antibiotics, is that going to allow you to heal faster? Or does that just prevent the infection?
Just prevents the infection.
I think so, yeah.
I don't think it necessarily affects healing speed. That's what steroids do, is affect healing speed, like corticosteroids and things like that.
Yeah. But I mean, like if you're healing your piercing and it got infected and it became open wound again, that steps backward. It would take longer for it to heal. Can't imagine not a lot longer, but I was just kind of curious what the antibiotics would do as far as the speed of the healing process.
Interesting. And when you heal a bump, like how long does that normally take?
Sometimes you get rid of the source of the problem and the bump goes away within days. Sometimes I've seen bumps last months. It's really, really frustrating. If it's lasting months, I always question, like, what are you doing to irritate the piercing? Is it just a little crusties getting pulled inside? Are you sleeping on it? Is it improper jewelry? You got to question everything.
Emily got a labret pierced 5 weeks ago, and it feels like it's angled downwards. Is this normal, and will this affect putting a ring in it eventually?
A little bit. I typically pierce labrets more angled down. When you look at most people when they have the longer one, it is pointing down a little bit. Part of the reason is when you do this, you're pulling the disc higher up on the inside of your mouth, which will pull further away from your teeth, which could cause any damage. You don't want to go too high up that way, but I do go to a small angle. And typically your lip kind of has that curve where it kind of pouts out. So that small angle, it's still perpendicular, so the ring still should fit fairly snug around your lip. Now, the other thing is sometimes your lips are actually wider and thicker than the piercing is tall, which would affect the ring to not be snug, but flop back and forth too.
Anna has a question. Is it okay to go swimming in a pool with a recent nipple piercing? And does nipple tape prevent the water from interfering with the healing?
Nipple tape is a thing?
I'm not familiar.
I'm not sure either. If you're talking about Tegaderm patches, which is like a waterproof Band-Aid, that will work. Okay, that looks like a clear piece of saran wrap. And if that's what you mean by nipple tape, maybe. The only thing that popped in my head is like sometimes girls have the loose shirts and they use like certain tapes to kind of hold the shirt against. Right. I don't know if that's called nipple tape.
Right. And so generally you'd want something made to be waterproof.
A medical waterproof Band-Aid is what you're going to be using. Going in there with an open wound, that nipple piercing is considered to be an open wound for probably a minimum of a month. All those germs, the bacteria in there. Granted, there's a lot of chemicals that are going to kill a lot of those germs and bacteria. Those chemicals can cause problems too, but there's a risk of both of them in there. So cover it. Keep it clean.
Axillity Claps has had a nose ring for about 4 months now. Mm-hmm. Is it okay to switch to a different ring? Can we change jewelry after 4 months?
As long as it feels and looks really good and it's been that way for a month plus, yeah, you're totally fine.
Pretty serious one here. Jetty Media wants to know, have you ever poked yourself with a needle while piercing?
Yes and no. I've never gotten a direct needle stick from the actual piercing. The part that got me, and pay attention here, piercers, because this is an actual thing, is when we're done with our tools and our implements, they get sterilized and processed. I was using a taper as an 18 gauge taper, and it was in my bin. And when I was taking the tapers out from the dirty bin to put in the sterilizer, one of the pins went through my glove and went underneath my nail bed and actually broke the skin. So that was a time I technically got a needle stick. It wasn't directly from that. It might not have been, but I consider in the biohazard area, that was a full-on needle stick, even though it was a taper and I wasn't doing the piercing at the time. So you got to be aware and careful at all times. This is to all apprentices, all piercers. Be aware of all your tools at all times. So important.
Got to stay safe.
But no, I've never done direct needle stick that way.
Well, that's good. Yeah. It's about having respect for the tools. I'm sure you don't want to do that.
No, here's another factor. I heard this story a long time ago about a piercer who was done with their tray and they cleaned up everything and the needle's still on the tray and they got a needle stick because the needle went into their palm.
Oh, just crumpling everything up.
Now, if you ever get pierced by me, you will always hear me say, and needles going to the sharps container, never to be used again. Because because everyone makes a reaction to it, like, oh, like funny. Like, no, I say that so I know you laughed about it. I know where that needle went. Everyone knows it went there, and it also assures you're getting a new needle each time too.
So it reminds you.
It's just such a great thing to say, and it's such a win-win situation. And I've never had that needle stick because I heard that horror story and I changed my ways immediately.
I mean, and that kept you from getting the needle stick.
Yep, that evolved.
WH would like to know, how long does a proper body piercing apprenticeship take?
It depends on the situation, how many piercings you're seeing. If you're at a shop where they're only doing one piercing a day and you're only seeing nostril piercings, it's going to take years and years and years. Like, how are you trained to do all the piercings if you're not ever seeing them?
Okay, so that's part of it too, is a high volume enough shop that you're going to see bridges, you're going to see septums, you're going to see the exotic genitals.
You're not a full body piercer if you've only done nostril piercings.
And I bet a lot of people that their training mostly consists of the simple stuff.
Correct. So it depends on your teacher, how fast it goes. Like, my apprentice right now is going on 1.5 years. I'm guessing probably 2 years he'll be done and completely ready to go. But it depends on the pace they're doing. He also has another job but can't do it as full time. So that also slows things down. The city of Las Vegas says a minimum of 6 months. I think that's probably too fast for apprenticeship. I would say 1 year to 2 years seems to be the average. It could be longer, it could be less though.
Zoe says hi from Denmark.
Hi, Zoe from Denmark.
Had my bridge pierced a bit over a month ago, and sometimes when I clean it, some junk comes out of there. Is this something to be concerned about?
No, you're going to get a little crusties. And like I said, mine gets crusties pulled in all the time, and sometimes you get a little extra buildup. Just keep cleaning it. I've had mine for years and years and years, and I still get little crusties.
But if it's a yellow or green discharge, that would indicate infection, and we should see a doctor then.
Yellowish, greenish, grayish. A little bit of pus isn't a big deal because your bar, those crusties, if you're scratching you're getting dead skin cells, and then your body's plasma and so forth kind of pushes it out. So it's going to look like that pus, maybe that clear, sticky plasma. There's, so that can happen. But like I said, if it's sore and you got thick pus coming out of there and it's radiating heat, go see a doctor.
Medical time.
Yes.
How do you feel about threaded jewelry or threader jewelry? I see the dangly pretty threaders all over social media, but wonder if the metal quality is subpar.
Threader jewelry. You're going to have to help me out, Jared.
I'm working on it.
What you're talking about. The only thing I can think of is sometimes they make PTFE jewelry, which is like weed whacker line, basically. It's kind of a hard plastic. And they come in like long lengths. And you can kind of cut it. And sometimes you can tap your own threads on those. I don't like plastic jewelry.
These. We're calling threader jewelry. It looks like chains
I know what you're talking about.
Through the holes. Yes. What do we think about that?
These things are super cool as long as your piercing's fully healed up. Now, back in the early 90s when there was this phase where people, I probably shouldn't say this so people will start this. Don't do this. People were piercing with chains, and the chains were healing, so they had permanent piercings and they had parts of chains sticking out of their body. This is a bad idea. Don't do this. That would be my concern about the spreaders, is people are starting people with this jewelry and you're healing the chain part in the middle. Like trying to remove that's a doctored plastic surgeon. I don't even know what they would do to remove it. That would be terrible. So you have to be fully healed up, and then you can wear these. And make sure you're not wearing the chain through the middle part. Make sure it's the actual bar. As you can see, these things look like a series of like nunchucks where it's like bar, chain, and that's what it has to be.
And as Emily points out, like there's no way for us to really know the metal quality here. You know what I mean? These are random like Etsy items and eBay items. So like,
correct.
We don't really know what we're putting in there.
Correct. Sometimes you can get some decent quality plated jewelry. Sometimes it's going to be solid 14 karat, but a lot of these places on here might be lying about it too, because there's no one to really fact check them. So keep that in mind too.
Paige Cat wants to know, what are the odds of cheek or Dahlia rejection?
Dahlia rejection is much higher than a cheek rejection. Cheek rejection means you'd be piercing your cheeks this far back, and that jewelry would keep growing until it came all the way out, giving you the Joker smile. I think people would actually do that if it actually rejected.
Right.
I think there would be some people who would do that.
Connect them with a rubber band.
So there you go.
We're giving terrible advice. Don't do that.
No Joker piercings. Okay. Dahlia piercings, because they're a little bit more shallow and there might not be enough of a ridge to grab a hold of, there's a possibility they could reject out. If pierced deep enough, you shouldn't have any problems. I've never seen or heard of rejected Dahlia piercings, but I'm not saying it's out of the realm of capabilities.
So Gilda is going in for surgery on January 13th. They said no jewelry.
Correct.
They've got 4 piercings, 4 holes in November. Is there anything we can do to put through the holes to help them not close? One of them's a tragus. So this would be...
You need retainers. Retainers are placeholders, and this is what the retainers were designed for. They weren't designed for your jobs where you can put them in every single day. Now, retainers generally have like little O-rings on the front, on the top, which are like little rubber bands, and they're going to kind of hold that jewelry in place. So generally, like the day before, go see your piercer, set up an appointment, make sure they have the retainers to put in there, and they will allow glass or plastic. Now, if you have like a tragus piercing here, and you need to put a retainer in there and they're operating that area, you might lose your piercing because it might get in their way. But if it's not in their way, they will allow you to have these and they won't allow your piercing to close up. So
here's some pictures of what you mean by retainers.
So there's all different styles. There's glass ones, there's plastic ones, there's silicone ones. I prefer the glass ones, especially if it's a newer healing piercing, because the plastic, the quality, it can cause problems. But the advantage to some of the plastic ones is some of them have threaded ends. It's granted it's external, but they're not as likely to fall out. So there's options. Talk to your piercer about planning ahead for this operation.
So old person is getting a septum piercing soon.
Old person, huh?
Old person wants to eventually wear tusks.
Okay.
So planning on getting it pierced larger, would you recommend going for a 10 or a 12 if we're going for a large septum piercing?
The tusks come in different ways, because either you can get the tusk where it has like the threaded end on the inside and then the bigger tusk coming out.
So what are we talking about when we say tusks? What do we mean?
My bad. A tusk is a septum piercing, which is the middle of the nose here, and that's where you wear like the bone or the big piece.
Oh, like the Sideshow Bob thing, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So, but sometimes the tusk, the bar is that big all the way through there. Sometimes it's real thin, normal size, and it gives the illusion like the big bone or bars going through there. So if you know the style of jewelry you're getting, you kind of go there. Now here at my shop, we only have the larger sizes here, and they start at probably an 8 gauge. So if you got pierced at the 12 or 10, you're still going to need to stretch up. If it was pierced properly, septum stretching isn't that terrible, but you would have several months of stretching afterwards. But the bigger you start, the sooner you can get that tusk in.
Joshua Williams is thinking about getting a vertical transverse lobe piercing, but can't find much info. Healing times, pain level. Also, wanted to know if a lobe orbital around it, should they be getting separately?
Come to me in Vegas. I want to do this. Okay. For those of you who are like, what is Josh talking? It was Josh, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Transverse. No, we're going to go to the here. Transverse lobe piercing. Vertical is up and down this way. So you're going to see a bead at basically like the top of the antitragus area right here. And then the bead comes out on the bottom. Okay, a normal transverse lobe is horizontal side to side, the long way with a barbell. Now, what Josh is talking about is you have the transverse lobe here, and he's talking about getting an orbital to go around it.
That's fun.
It's super rad. I would say start with the transverse lobe, heal that up, and then maybe do the orbital afterwards. I don't know if I would want, it needs to fully heal up and then do the orbital after. I wouldn't do both at the same time.
So
beautiful idea. That is so rad.
Very
so
cool.
rad.
So stuff that gets Scott excited is exotic piercings like that. Now, Kaylee mentioned earlier having an irritated rook that's 2 months old.
Okay.
The question is should we be worried? Because last night she was cleaning it and it randomly bled for the first time since getting it. Is that a cause for concern?
No, that means you got crusties that got pulled inside and scratched. It happens. Now, I know it's going to seem like it's really irritated. The rook stays swollen the whole healing process. There's a couple cartilages that this happens to. So if you took a picture of this rook and then this rook, once the swelling's gone completely down, you're all the way healed up. Just because it's swollen doesn't mean it's irritated. But if it's red and puffy and you have crusties pulling inside, that does mean it's irritated. Keep cleaning it, keep the crusties off. And also keep in mind, if the bar is if you have overswollen and the beads are getting sucked in, you might need a longer bar in there too. So take a picture, take a look at it, and if you need a longer bar, talk to your piercer, but keep cleaning your piercing.
Christy says, I want to stretch my earlobes, and there's a possibility of wanting to get it closed a few years down the line. How long does the shrinking process take?
Generally what I tell people is 0 gauge, maybe 00 is the point of no return. If you had a normal earlobe piercing and you started stretching and you stretched properly where it never hurt, it should close back up to a normal size. There's not a guarantee, but anything past that, the hole might still shrink up, but you still might have a little bit of a gap in there. As far as it shrinking back up to the normal size, I would say plan on a year. I don't know exactly, but expect probably a year for it to go back to close to normal for you.
Donald Smith says, hello, love the show.
Hi, Donald. Thank you.
Curious if it's possible to have a dermal/surface piercing above your high nostril, but below your bridge, like right against the bone. Is that possible?
Possible, yes. Good idea. No.
How come? Because of the right against the bone part?
The skin here is so thin and so tight against the bone that I think if you got a dermal, it's not going to sit flush because they can't make them small enough. And then also being that the skin is so tight that I think it's going to raise the skin up and probably cause it to reject, which is the exact same thing with the surface bar because they can only make the bar so thin to be able to get it in there. I don't think it's possible. It's probably possible, maybe 1%, but odds aren't in your favor. I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
All right.
I like the creative idea, way to keep thinking about outside the box.
But that one's not going to.
I just don't think it's going to heal. You know, every person's different. Maybe you have a lot of extra skin there and maybe it would work for you. But I know feeling mine, I don't think I would have a chance.
You wouldn't say.
No.
So Philip says, hi from Slovakia.
Hi, Philip from Slovakia.
Please, how can I go directly to a lobe tunnel 3 to 4 millimeters without having an earring, without biopsy punch, when I don't have my lobe pierced yet? Now, that's basically what we talked about earlier with the piercing Jose's lobes, right? We have a video about this.
Pierce with a large gauge needle. Needles come in many different sizes, and you can actually pierce at that size. Now, was it 3, 4, like 8 gauge? I'm not sure what 8 gauge into the millimeters would be, but that's the soonest you can start seeing tunnels where you can actually see through it. Now, when you pierce at a larger size like this, a lot of times if you're starting at that 8 gauge or the 2 or 3 millimeter, a lot of times the piercing is so loose by the time you're healed, you almost need to stretch to the next size.
So you end up having to go even bigger.
So you might need to go even bigger. So if you're concerned about going bigger than that, I mean, you might want to start a little bit smaller and stretch up to that size. But 8 gauge is about the size when you start seeing the tunnels. I know they make smaller ones, but a lot of times the flares get pulled inside or it's cheap externally threaded jewelry and it just doesn't work.
And Philip or anyone else who's interested, if you search for piercing Jose's lobes at a 0 gauge, you can actually watch in a video Scott performing what he just explained, where you pierce and then immediately stretch a brand new piercing. It's pretty cool to watch.
I got the hiccups.
Drink water or be scared.
Oh,
try them both. All right, we're going to ask a few more questions. We're rounding it down here, about 5 more minutes. We've already mentioned it, but real quick for the viewers that are just getting here, your overall thoughts on tea tree oil, something we should be doing?
I don't like any of the essential oils, tea tree oil, lavender oil, any of those things. They weren't necessarily designed to go inside the body. They're meant for aromas and things like that. Maybe put on the outside of your skin. But keep in mind, piercings are open wounds and that stuff's going inside your body. Most of those things cause more problems than actually help. You might have a friend or someone who told you, oh, it cured mine up. They got rid of the source of the problem and their piercing healed up, and they just said that the tea tree or whatever oil is the thing that healed it. But I guarantee you they healed it up. There's no chemical or drug that can heal it up for you.
Gerardo says hello from Spain.
Hi, Gerardo. Gerardo from Spain.
I got industrials, 1 on each ear 6 months ago, going well.
Sweet.
Want to know that if bumps are made, is that normal? And at what point are they going to go away and it'll be fully healed?
Okay. There's no way to truly answer that because when you do an industrial piercing, if you have one angle this way and then the next one's completely off at a different angle and you have to twist and contort it to make it go to the right angle, this piercing will always have a bump. Now, if both piercings were at the exact same angle and it's in the right spot, sometimes an irritation bump goes away after maybe a couple weeks to maybe a couple months. But keep cleaning your piercing. It's probably going to be a full year before you're all the way healed up. And if you have 2 industrials, I'm guessing it's 1 on each side. That means if you're sleeping on it, that's probably why the bump is there. So be patient, keep cleaning.
Is a nipple piercing healing process as bad as a helix?
No, I don't think so. Nipple piercing, for the first week you have it, your nipple is going to be hypersensitive. So generally, if you have a looser shirt and things are rubbing up against it, you're going to feel every thread. So generally, tighter shirt, tighter bra, things like that will help make it feel more comfortable. It's like a bruise for maybe a month or so, where if you bumped or hit it, like an ear, it's gonna be a little tender or sore. But after that, nipple piercings are pretty easy unless you don't clean off the crusties. Your nipple piercings will be healed in 3 to 6 months. But the crusties last a year to 2 years. So if you're constantly pulling those crusties through, it's going to stay sore the whole time. Now, a helix piercing is probably going to be healed up in 4 months to maybe a year. It's a longer healing process because it doesn't get as much blood flow. But I don't know. I think the nipple piercing is an easier overall heal. Scarier to get, but easier heal.
Chloe says, hi, I watch your videos a lot. I'm 17 and I want to get my tongue pierced soon. I wanted to do it at a local shop, but I can't due to no ID. Should I get it done from a woman that does piercings out of her home?
Never get pierced by someone who's doing things out of their home, especially if you don't have IDs and things like that. Even if you were getting pierced out of the home, I wouldn't want to pierce a minor without, have all the paperwork to still try to protect myself. But I wouldn't pierce out of the home. I am a professional and I pierce in a studio. You're going to get a quality piercing that way. It's going to be straight. It's going to be done right. And we're inspected by like the Board of Health. The lady who's doing it at your home, you don't know if it's a sterile needle, if it's been reused, if you're going to get a disease from it, if it's the improper metal, if they're putting the right size jewelry in there.
And even aside from that, if it'll just be crooked and ugly.
Yeah.
If it just will not look good because the
odds aren't in your favor.
Artist's eye.
You got to wait till the right time to get pierced. Piercing is about timing. If you don't have the ID, apply for one. It doesn't take that long to get. Anyone can get a government issued ID, identification card, passport, and anyone can do it. So
it's worth the wait. Worth the wait.
Wait. It's totally worth the wait.
You hear us, Chloe. It's worth it to do it the right way and make sure you're really going to be happy with the piercing you get instead of hurrying up to do it and then being unhappy.
I mean, I've heard of people, good piercers, doing piercings out of homes, but that's like the needle in the haystack. 1 out of 100. So chances are you're going to get messed up. Go to a professional.
Question from Fluffy Ninja Stars. It sounds like it might be some sort of urban legend. You tell me.
Fluffy Ninja Stars, an urban legend? It sounds like this person is. I love that name.
Want to get my nipples pierced, and I heard people saying that a noodle/nerve came out. Is that common, and what do you do when that happens?
I know exactly what you're talking about. When you heal a piercing, you're healing something called a fistula, which is that tube of scar tissue on the inside. Sometimes when people get pierced or re-pierced, we can push some of that tissue out. Now, the other thing is sometimes when you have a healed piercing and you push on the nipple, you can see that tube come out a little bit. Same thing with earlobes, same thing with a lot of looser skin piercings. So this is a normal thing. Don't pick at it. Don't do anything. It's a normal thing, so leave it be. That's what your body is supposed to be doing. Did I answer that right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
The other thing I was going to say is sometimes if you're re-piercing a piercing, sometimes you'll see like a little tube of like white stuff come out, like because your piercing healed that tube of scar tissue and it shrunk, and it's almost like a pimple and a whitehead. Sometimes we pop it and that dead skin cells comes out too. So,
couple more questions before we call this to an end. Tamashiro says, question, a bridge piercing can paralyze? A person in one of your videos said that.
No.
I should find that comment and delete it.
Yeah, for real. No, bridge piercings cannot paralyze. I was just talking about a similar thing. Like there's so many urban myths. Way back in the day, they said you shouldn't pierce your upper cartilage because it can paralyze half your face or half your body or something like that. I actually had the biopsy punch at a 0 gauge up at that size. And I was like, if that existed, I would have done it. But still, that myth continually went around. I believe a lot of these myths come from 2 different people. Number one, people who want the piercing piercing, but they're so afraid of it and they're just perpetually pushing this myth on. And 2, parents who don't want their kids to get pierced, so they're putting that myth out there, so it scares them into not getting the piercing. If it was that dangerous, we wouldn't be doing the piercing. It'd be illegal for us to do. We are not doctors or medical professionals. That privilege would be taken away from us right away.
All right. And one final question about the subject of tooth damage. It's a common one. It comes up a lot.
Yes.
If you have artificial teeth, like you've had a root canal or an implant or something like that on your front teeth, is a Smiley piercing even more dangerous? Should we worry more about that if we've had some sort of reconstructive tooth surgery?
That's completely up to you. Generally, for Smiley piercings, you get more gum problems than you get tooth problems. If you're seriously concerned about the tooth problems, change to the clicker where it has no bead, and then it rubs more against your gums than your teeth. Now, if your gums are eroding, no matter what, take that piercing out. It's going to cause problems, which your teeth could eventually fall out. Now, if you leave the ones with the beads in there and you feel it rubbing up against your teeth, yeah, it's going to do damage. But the appropriate size jewelry and the appropriate shape jewelry makes a world of difference. All right. Now, again, I just want to remind everyone, we're not going live next week. I'm going to be in Minnesota with my family celebrating the holidays. So I just want to say happy holidays to everyone. We sincerely wish to everyone out there to have a safe, happy holidays. And again, keep putting holes in your body. We'll see you all in the next video.